Hello everyone and welcome once again to Channels Television's continuing coverage of the Kogi and Bayelsa elections. I am Gimba Umar.
And I am Ayo Makide. We have correspondents, as we said to you earlier, across the different locations in those two states, and we have some updates about the elections for you.
Well, the exercise began early in some areas and not so early at other areas. Let's show you some of these interesting images coming from Bayelsa State, where officials of the elections are seen on boats being transported to various areas for election duties. Those are the pictures that we got earlier, just moments ago.
Also have reports of flooding in some parts of the state. You know, this is happening in Kolokuma, Okokuma, as well as Sagbama local government area. Those areas are flooded, and perhaps the reason also why some wards and units are merged.
And in Otuoke, that's of course is the community of the former president of the country, Dr. Goodluck Jonathan. Materials didn't quite get to the polling units earlier. Those are the visuals that we got. Those materials, it took some time before they got to their destinated points. We're still keeping track to see how well those elections in those areas are coming through.
And in Kogi, we take you to Kogi West Central Senatorial District, where some of the candidates are seen casting their ballots.
Well, very interesting. Some of those visuals that we saw, we did see Senator Dino Milaye and, of course, Senator Smart Adeyemi as well. Both candidates are also running for the senatorial elections in Kogi State today. And perhaps at the end of the day, hopefully a lot of people are keeping their fingers crossed, hoping that we'll get those results out, if not today, by tomorrow, worst case scenario, and not having any situations where we'll have INEC to give and, you know, those inconclusive situations that were recorded in February when we went through this process again. But these are some of the interesting pictures that we saw, and we have reports also of some areas being flooded in Bayelsa State. In Kogi State, we do have some interesting developments as well there, where we understand that Musa Wada, that's the PDP candidate, that's the picture. Musa Wada, the PDP candidate wards, was saved by the Whiskers at Ordu Biaga. That's in Dekina local government area of Kogi State, when hoodlums were repelled by security officers on ground there. The voters saying that they will not be deterred in casting their votes today and ensuring that the process is started and concluded.
Where is that boy inside? I want him out of
Well, those are those pictures that we have talked about the other time, and the hope is that this will be nipped in the bud and won't go, any worse than it already has, because ultimately, just as we, expressed earlier, what we want is a peaceful process that the people of Kogi State and, of course, the people of Bayelsa can be very, very confident in.
Well, let's get a sense of what is happening on the ground there in Kogi State. We have our correspondent Pius Agbo joining us now at the scene of that a very unfortunate event. But thank goodness that the security operatives were there to try to curl that situation. It would have been one that is quite difficult to bring under control. Pius, what is it that you have for us?
We are here at Odugbeaga, where the PDP governorship candidate is supposed to cast his election ballot. He got here to the venue to just see how preparations were going on, checking out if everybody was set for the election process. Of course, a few minutes later, people who suspected to be thugs attempted invading the voting area here to disrupt the gathering of voters, to also, in the process, displace them from even voting here today. Well, the situation is calm now because in their attempt to come in, they were repelled by the police officers and the voters here who didn't allow them gain access into the voting area. But for now, calm has been restored, and the voters say they will not be deterred by this action. From Odu here in the Kina local government area of Kogi State, Pius Angbo reporting for Channels Television News.
Much Pius. One other thing that's, of course, from that we also heard the response or the comments of the PDP candidate at that election, Mr. Wada. He has a thing or two to say.
What I'm interested in is one man, one vote, and they have come to disrupt the voting pattern. Of course, they've been repelled, and I think from now we are conscious, we are serious, we are vigilant, because we want to ensure we vote and our vote counts.
As the PDP candidate, governorship candidate for Kogi State, that's Musa Wada.
Yes, indeed. Let's try to see how much more we can get because there's a continuing coverage, especially brought to you by Channels Television, covering the elections in Bayelsa as well as in Kogi State. Let's go to Bayelsa now, where our correspondent is standing by live to give us an update on what is actually happening. The information that we have is that some polling units are having these elections going through. We're seeing boats of some of the officials being ferried to where they ought to be for this exercise. Tell us, have they arrived where they're supposed to be, and where you are? It seems to suggest that the exercise is quite going on smoothly. Tell us more, Dobra.
Yes, I'm at Agudama Epie. That's in Yanagwa local government area, and the exercise is going on smoothly here. Voting commenced by 10 a.m. and everything has been going peacefully. There's not been any threat. People have been coming out in their numbers to vote. Now, earlier on, where you saw that people were being ferried across to the polling unit was at Sampo in Kolokuma Pokuma area, local government area of Bayelsa State. Now, Sampo community is flooded, so there was no way to gain access into the community or either of the polling units, so people had to be ferried. Would send you videos, pictures of how lots of journalists, ADEC staff of INEC had to, carry the materials being ferried across to the polling unit. But then I can confirm to you that after, overcoming that little hiccup of being ferried across, voting has already commenced there. We also went to other areas in Pokoma local government, and we saw people came out in their numbers to participate in the exercise. We've gone to Southern Niger local government at Olokogbre. We've seen that people have been voting. So for all the places we've visited in Bayelsa State, Southern Niger local government, Sagbama local government, Pokoma local government, Brass local government, and now Yenegua local government, voting has commenced in most of the polling units.
Looking at about 8 local government areas that make up Bayelsa State, and you say that voting has already commenced there. But what more can you tell us with regards to the security arrangements? Are people feeling that sense of security of their lives and property? Because leading up to this time, there was that fear in place that some kind of upheavals may just erupt and people didn't feel very encouraged to come out.
Yes, there was that fear of being attacked, of experiencing violence on today, the election day. But I think that has really died down. That fear has really watered down in Bayelsa State, because for everybody that comes out, there's serious security presence. We've moved around 5 local government area already, and we've noticed that for every place there are checkpoints. They will check the vehicle, not just you having your INEC accreditation. No, they would actually check inside the vehicle to ensure that you're not carrying any arms before you go. They even go further to check, the accreditation of your organization. So just having this jacket and, having this is not enough to pass. You must have another means of identification before you can pass through any of the checkpoints. Around me, you see people moving freely because there's this sense of security that everywhere has watertight security in Bayelsa State.
Dobra, one other thing that's been a concern to one of our security consultants that we spoke with earlier was the likelihood that if elections started late, there would be the possibility that INEC could extend the process, the time for the process, so that more people can have the opportunity to express their franchise. Do you see that likelihood of an extension?
No, that can only be confirmed by INEC, because aside the fact that they started, behind schedule, there was also heavy downpour in Yenegua today. Now, that would have prevented some people that wanted to come earlier on, to just wait. Right now, we're experiencing a little bit of sunshine, just peeking through. So people are now coming out in their numbers. So that late start and the heavy downpour could lead to that, but that would be, announced by INEC. We haven't gotten that signal from INEC yet.
And still talking about INEC and the preparations, so we can see very largely now that it is on the way and people are getting to maybe cast their votes now in a very peaceful manner. But tell us more about those equipment that they use, especially the card reader. Have you encountered any of those kind of scenarios where we did record sometimes in February when we had the general elections of a malfunctioning of some of those equipment? Have you seen any or heard?
Amazingly, for all the polling units we visited, we haven't seen any smart card reader malfunctioning. Everything has been going on smoothly. INEC yesterday, when we spoke with them, we got informed that they had technicians on ground who are ready to, solve any smart card reader malfunctioning problems. I think having prepared earlier on, it's working very well in your favor. I haven't seen, we haven't heard from all our correspondents on ground in Bayelsa. We haven't heard or seen anywhere the smart card readers malfunctioned in Bayelsa State. You can look behind me. Everything is orderly. It's going on smoothly. People come in, stand on the queue, vote, and leave the premises.
No, and also another hydra-headed concern in previous elections that we saw was the issue of vote buying. And it was largely perpetrated by party agents, we understand. Do you have a sense of if that is actually going on in these elections today?
Yes. In this election, I haven't noticed any form of vote buying. Because the thing about vote buying is it has certain characteristics. You will see people gathered in clusters around the polling areas, people going to show them their PVCs before they vote and coming out to show that, okay, you know what, I voted for your party. That's when, you know, they have the exchange of whatever is given for voting. We've looked around all the polling units we visited. We haven't seen that, because when we come to a polling unit, the first thing we look out for is the security, how orderly the places are arranged, and are there clusters behind where people after voting go to say I've voted. We've not noticed that in any of the polling units we visited. So for now, we haven't seen any sense of vote buying for everywhere we visited. But if we do, we'll keep you updated.
Very much for that, Dobra. But good thing that, you know, you have gone round all these areas and seen things for yourself. But it will be interesting to find out what you think the election observers are saying. What kind of feelers are you getting from the election observers in Bayelsa or in or around, maybe as you moved around? What's the buzz that they are giving you about how this whole process is going in Bayelsa?
Okay, before now, their major concern was the election actually starting. For most of the election observers we saw, they were more concerned about the process actually starting. And when the voting began, they stayed back to see if it's going according to plan, ensuring there's no vote buying, there's no bullying, you know, there's no overzealous security personnel anywhere. Now, we haven't spoken with any of them, you know, to feel their pulse on, okay, you've seen this. What do you think went wrong? What's your general observation? We will do that immediately after this timeout, and we'll keep you updated on what they say, what they feel the Bayelsa election so far has been.
A concern that's been expressed over time is the participation of special groups, like people living with disabilities and women. Do you see anything happening towards any one of these two groups? And if there is any special arrangement made for people living with disabilities at any of the polling centers?
I remember in the build-up of the election, the build-up of the coverage, people living with disabilities made a strong case for, you know, preference, you know, when it comes to the exact day today, when it comes to the voting. I haven't noticed anything yet. In fact, I haven't actually seen anybody living with disability. Now that you've mentioned it, we would pay a closer look at it for other polling units we're going to visit, because the job continues, the coverage continues. So we're going to pay closer attention to see if we would see people living with disabilities, if they were given any special consideration. But we have women coming out. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, I'm seeing a woman with a baby. So having a baby, you know, a toddler didn't stop her from coming to vote. She's having her baby, she has voted. Other women came out with their children who they couldn't leave back at home. They came to exercise their franchise. So I think here we even have more women than men voting. So when it has to do with women voting, there's huge participation on the women gender, but for people living with disabilities, we haven't noticed any yet.
Sounds quite comforting that, you know, women are, you know, at peace, you know, being at that place. And then from what we can see, also the images we can see, there's a lot of people right there with you. That suggests that security there is, you know, is comfortable, such that people can come out in droves. Let me just confirm that it's the same in all the areas that you have been to and all the reports that you have gathered.
Okay, for all the areas I've been to, this scenario has been replicated. We've gone to Kolokoma, Opokuma. For the polling units we visited specifically, we've seen this. Now, we can't speak for other polling units that we didn't visit, but for the polling units we visited specifically in Southern Niger local government, in Kolokoma, Opokuma local government, in Brass LGA, now in Yanagwa LGA, this same scenario has been replicated. But if we notice anything that deviates from this, we'll quickly update you on it.
Okay, because in all that you have submitted to us this morning, I'm just wondering still, have you seen the police officers around where you are? Are they there?
At the moment, I can't see any police officer here. There were those at the gate. Now, this environment is fenced. It's a secondary school environment. It's fenced. There's a gate. So at the entry point, there's a gate. But around this vicinity, there's no police officer here at the moment. Okay, now I see one. I don't know if we could get him. He's being covered partly by that pillar over there. I see one there. There's just one for this number of persons here. So maybe they are located at strategic, positions around this area. But ask me, I've seen just one person, and those at the gate. Where I noticed heavy security presence was along the road. When you're driving through checkpoints, they have to check you properly, check your vehicle before you are patched through. Other than that, I haven't noticed any security present at the polling units.
Dobra, Tim Wood, many thanks indeed for giving us those very important updates as you go around the 8 local government areas in Bayelsa State that are going through this process as well to try to see who becomes governor at the end of the day. Many thanks indeed. Well, that's the kind of spirit. That's the kind of expectations that people want to see, that elections don't have to be a do or die affair. I don't have to feel insecure going out to cast my votes.
One thing that really, really comforts me is that for that number of people, we do not have so many policemen. It's very, very comforting that we can actually govern ourselves.
More so in Bayelsa State.
More so in Bayelsa State, which, security threat assessments have said is, highly volatile and all of that. In one area. And there are so many people from what we could see. I mean, it's very, very comforting.
But we're also getting some reports from Kogi State, where our correspondent Kayla Megwa, as well as Terry Kumi are. We're getting information that there have been some gunshots being fired and that ballot boxes have been snatched. You do remember the Inspector General of Police gave that warning that anyone who snatches a ballot box will face the brunt. Maybe, in his words, he said that ballot box snatchers will lose their lives. That is what he says. So perhaps this is one for the police to quickly wade into to try to see that we get those ballot boxes back.
The location that's, this has happened at is Ward 2, Lokoja. Shots were fired into the air and, of course, everyone had to scamper to safety. We should be taking a break in a little while, but we'll go to Abuja to speak with a National Commissioner of INEC, and he's also in charge of voter education and publicity. That's Mr. Festus Okoye. Thanks for joining us this moment, Mr. Okoye. So how far so far? What are the reports that you are getting from the 2 locations?
Well, the reports we've been getting so far is very, very positive. The reports we are getting from Bayelsa indicates that polling commenced on time in so many polling units, and we are also getting the same reports from Kogi State. So at this particular moment, we are happy with the level of our deployment, and we're also happy with the fact that the election is progressing well.
Well, we received reports, and I'm sure you did as well, in some parts of Bayelsa that materials didn't get to location as and when due. Could you kindly tell us what happened and how has this been resolved?
For Bayelsa, the materials left from the central bank directly to the registration area centers. And so from the registration area centers, we are supposed to deploy direct to the polling units. But the officers, the ad hoc staff, are carrying both sensitive and non-sensitive materials. And some of the places have difficult topography, and they cannot go to the polling units without adequate security. But the reports we got is that in some of the areas, in some of the places that had difficulty, some of the police officers went directly to the polling units rather than going with the presiding officers and the assistant presiding officers with the electoral materials direct from the registration areas to the polling units. So that accounts for some of the delays we had in some places. places. So we've gotten some of these reports in our situation room, and we have addressed most of the reports. And as at now, in most of the places where we got reports from, voting has commenced, and we are happy with the progress that is being made.
Mr. Okoye, we'll get back to you again to try to dig deeper into some of the concerns that have been raised and how well you have been able to conduct your officials to conduct these two elections in Kogi as well as in Bayelsa State. When we return after these messages, you're watching the live studios of the coverage of the election, so we'll be back shortly after this break. Join us again. Welcome back to the election studios, bringing everything to you live from Channels Television here in Lagos. We're getting some information that there has been some level of violence at the Ajayi Crowther School, a polling unit in Lokoja, one of the biggest polling units in Lokoja, and there has been some degree of violence there. We understand that people are scampering for safety, and a lot of things have been destroyed, including ballot boxes and ballot papers thrown just everywhere. As soon as we get those visuals, we're able to push them to you. But that's the information we're getting. Also, we got the information from Ward 13, Unit 39, Otazi Playground in Otuoke. That's where the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, was casting his votes in company of his wife, Patience Jonathan. Some of those pictures are still coming through. That happened just moments ago. We'll update you on that as well as soon as we get those pictures. Now let's go to the Ajayi Crowther School, those visuals that we saw earlier. This is what we saw, one of the biggest polling units in Kogi State, in Lokoja to be precise, where Kayla Megwa, our correspondent, is covering. This is what the aftermath has turned out to be, unfortunately, so too.
Armed men cart away ballot boxes in that particular place, and of course people, as we mentioned, had to scamper for safety because no one knew what's going to happen. Ballot boxes snatched away, and we're just wondering how INEC is going to take this on board. We'll be able to ask Mr. Festus Okoye what would happen in this kind of scenario.
Yes, indeed, a very unfortunate situation that we're seeing. Those are pictures that we got just moments ago. But let's keep it on the wraps and get the views of Festus Okoye, who is in our Abuja studios. Mr. Okoye, this is very short of what we expected to come through in these elections. This is one of the biggest polling units that we saw in Kogi State. That's the Ajayi Crowther College. And this is what the ruins suggest to us, that will this election still go on in that place?
Well, you see, even before today, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission has said consistently that the reports we are getting in relation to people mobilizing violence for this particular election was not particularly too good. And based on this, we've had several meetings with the security agencies to try to get them to do the type of deployment that can prevent people from going into the polling units, scaring voters away, destroying ballot boxes and destroying ballot papers, and injuring and maiming some of our ad hoc staff. Now, our expectation is that the security officers that will be in the inner cordon of the polling unit will not be armed, but there must be some level of consultation and cooperation and synergy between those ones in the inner cordon of the polling units and the ones at the outer cordon, so that if there's any untoward incident within the inner cordon of the polling unit, those who are armed at the outer cordon can move in quickly and stabilize the situation and arrest whatever problem there is. But you know, when people mobilize violence and they are based in the area, they understand the terrain very well, they understand the geography of the area, and they understand even where the police officers who are armed are at a particular period in time, and are able to overwhelm the people. I do not think that this is our own expectation and that this is not what we planned. We have deployed on time, our officials are there, and some people are trying to prevent the voters from exercising their democratic franchise. And this is completely unacceptable to the Independent National Electoral Commission.
So what do you do in this instance? This is a major polling unit in Kogi, in Lokoja. What's going to happen to this polling unit in Ajayi Crowther College?
Well, I cannot tell you sitting here what is going to happen, but there are presiding officers there, there are supervisors there, and definitely they are going to make a report on what has taken place, and that report of what has taken place will go to the collation officers, and then there will be a determination whether, based on what has happened, whether we should go back to conduct a fresh supplementary election in those areas, or whether whatever happened in that particular polling unit or that particular area will not affect the entire configuration of the election and the entire results of the election. So it depends on the type of report we get from the presiding officers and from their supervisors relating to what is going on and what has happened. But from the visuals we are seeing, nobody should be happy about this, because our expectation is that the narrative about Kogi and Bayelsa being states that are prone to violence, or being states where people mobilize violence and become merchants of violence, will become a thing of the past with this particular election. But I want to presume that this may just be an isolated incident and that it's not generalized. So we are going to warehouse this incident, wait for the reports from the presiding officers and their supervisors, and then make a determination on the way forward.
Mr. Okoye, it would seem like there's been some kind of breakdown in the apparatus, because from what we understand, you have been telling us over the past few weeks, there's supposed to be armed military men on the outer cordon, and on the inner cordon, there are supposed to be some policemen who may or may not be armed, you know, but you can make that clear as well. So in this instance, there are 100 polling units affected in this particular location that we are talking about, and more than 49,000 registered voters were expected to be there. What is the default position of INEC in an event that such a thing happens?
Well, it really depends on each situation. You see, each polling unit is on its own. The fact that there has been a disruption in one polling unit does not automatically mean that there has been a disruption in the other polling units. So, and there is a presiding officer for each polling unit, and that presiding officer has to file a report if there has been destruction of the ballot papers or ballot boxes or other election materials in a particular polling unit. But in this particular instance, unless we get a report from each presiding officer in these polling units, we cannot lump all the polling units in that particular locality and make a generalized determination of what has happened. But our position is that in places where there is this type of disruption, our determination on what to do next depends on the report from the presiding officer on what exactly happened. And then when we get to the collation centers and we have these reports, we now make a determination whether we should go back and do that election afresh in those areas, or whether we should give that particular polling unit 0 votes. But it all depends on the determination made by the collation officers and the returning officers for this particular election.
Earlier, we had the CEO of Yega Africa, Simon Todo, and he raised concerns about the time frame to which some of these elections were supposed to start, and how late the arrival of materials got to some places, and was also looking at the possibility of you, as the umbrella body conducting these elections, the electoral umpire, as a matter of fact, for an extension in some cases where elections started a little late. Are you factoring that into your books? You have to understand the point I'm making. Sometimes it is not right, and it is dangerous to use what is going on, what has happened in 1 or 2 wards or in 1 or 3 wards to make a generalized statement relating to over 300 registration areas in a particular state. We need to take, if there are isolated incidents in relation to the polls not opening on time or our officials not deploying on time in a particular registration area, we should isolate that and not use it to generalize. But our procedure is that even if we open polls at 10 o'clock, everybody who arrives at the polling unit before 2 p.m. will remain at the polling unit until the last person votes. The polling unit will not close. It is when the last person votes that the polling unit will close. But if somebody comes to the polling unit after 2 p.m., when the polls are supposed to close officially, of course the person will not be allowed to vote. But our procedure and our process is that whoever arrives the polling unit on time will be allowed to vote, even if it extends to up to 5 p.m. So we have some of these issues under control, and we believe that every individual who is duly registered and who has a permanent voter's card and who is duly accredited for this particular election will be in a position to exercise his or her franchise.
All right, Mr. Okoye, thank you very much. We'll be right back with you. But right now, let's very quickly go to Bayelsa State, where Dare Idowu, a correspondent, is standing by. Yeah, so, Dare, what's the update? Where exactly are you and what's happened so far?
Yeah, thank you very much. We are still here at Ekpia 3 in Bayelsa State. Of course, voting is still ongoing and the process seems quite smooth around here. Since the voting has started, there seems to be a slight problem with coordination around here. Some of the units, they're getting it quite right. But if you look in this direction right now, the voters are very close to the electoral offices. And if you look at the cubicle where people are expected to vote without having their privacy being tampered with in any way, it's so close to where the voting lines are as well. So, but these are some of the slight challenges around there. Not so much of a problem. I spoke with some of the electoral officers earlier about how the card readers are working. They said they're working quite well. A little bit of problem here and there, but they've been able to fix them. One major aspect of this election, security, and we've been getting reports from some of the local government, 8 local government altogether. This is the largest in terms of the voting population. And I have here with me Pedro Ideba, is the ACG of the NSCDC. Is going to be talking to me now about what is found so far. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
What information are you gathering from your men on the field?
The information we are gathering today has been very encouraging, unlike that of the presidential election. The governorship election has been peaceful, and you can see here, this is one of the largest voting points. On Padek, Amarata was 6. People are turned out in number to exercise their franchise, and security was also in place. And there has not been any complaint from anywhere. Though at moments, some places, there were delayed of sensitive material, but voting has commenced in everywhere. And from so far, we've gotten a very positive report regarding the election. The election so far is peaceful.
Yeah, can you talk to us about the synergy between the NSCDC and the other security operatives around here?
Even before this election period, I've had the opportunity of working here in Bayelsa State as a state commandant, and that time we have a very robust working relationship, the best you can ever think of in anywhere in the state. And in this election, before then, we've been working together. We had meetings together, and we had joint patrol. Yesterday, we had a joint show of force, and we are working together. It's been a very interesting state. In spite of the pocket of violence before the election, the state is peaceful. Security agencies are working together, and we have a common force.
Thank you very much for talking to us at this point. Of course, it had pockets of violence before this election, but today is the election proper, and so far we haven't heard or reported any cases of violence, especially where we are at the moment. And of course, if there are details that are coming in the course of our coverage, we will basically get it across to you. Thank you very much. Back to you, studio.
Of these clarifications from you, if you can get to that point to make us understand how it is unfolding there. One thing we know is that, as Ayo did ask when we were in Kogi State, with the question of people who are disabled and, of course, women, do you see that happening? Are people who are disabled coming out to vote as well? Barry, can you hear me? Oh, okay. That connectivity, we lost it. But let's go to Terry in Kogi State, who is also standing by to give us an update on what's happening. Kogi, Terry, the latest that we got was that in that primary school, that's the Ajayi Crowther Primary School, there was some level of violence that were perpetrated there. And INEC is so saying that they'll wait for a report, a detailed report, to know what the next line of action will be. But where you are, what can you tell us? Is it the same situation or different?
We were here earlier at about 8 o'clock. We left here at about past 9. I'm looking in this direction because tempers are flaring in that direction, and you could clearly tell that they're agitated. And that's because some moments ago, in fact, give and take an hour after we left here, we were told by our eyewitnesses when we returned that some unknown gunmen showed up here shooting sporadically. They had got information that this was going to happen because they were told that it was happening in several polling units around here, but they were not prepared because, as I said earlier, this polling unit was manned by unarmed policemen, and the armed gunmen came in a Hilux vehicle, shot the place up, took the ballot boxes, took the ballot papers, took everything, and went away. Now, we were told by an eyewitness that 2 people were shot. We don't have clear details to that, but 2 people came forward to say that they know the people who were shot. And as a matter of fact, one of them claims to be a brother to the person who was shot. So that's the situation here. We also came from Ayetoro 2, polling unit 003, where we saw live ammunition on the ground. We saw the ballot boxes broken. We saw chairs scattered. We saw ballot papers torn right there. And interestingly, that polling unit is next to the NSCDC office in Ayetoro. So that's the situation right now with Kogi West. We've just returned from Iara, and it's peaceful there. All the way from there till this place, we didn't record any case of violence. But Ayetoro and Iluafo seem to have some problems with that. We also have information that there are some other polling units that have been attacked, so we will be heading there once we leave this place to find out. But the youths around are becoming agitated, and hopefully it doesn't escalate. It's back to you.